Let me get straight to the question of the underground cables that have been ripped up by ship anchors several times in the last 15 months. You think that's sabotage?
Well, I mean, we attribute when we know exactly what's happened. So we've had 3 of these cases in the past year. First time we let the ship go. I think that was a mistake. Second time it was in Swedish-German waters. They boarded. And third time we actually confiscated. The investigations are still ongoing, and there are always a couple of options. One is sabotage, and the other one is mistake, and the third one is incompetence.
Do you have evidence for sabotage?
Well, our investigation is still ongoing, so we can't really take a stand on that. But the bottom line is that it doesn't really matter who does it. The most important thing is that we're able to prevent it, and if we're not able to prevent it, that we can actually correct it very quickly. Now, of course, we have a Baltic sentry operation in the Baltic Sea, so I think our situation picture is better than what it used to be, and we're able to deal with it, and I think the Finnish model actually works.
You have said, as you said, that when you find the culprit, you'll attribute it, but that hasn't happened.
No, not yet. We're very much a rule of law-based society, so we have a criminal investigation, and once that is finished, then we draw our conclusions.
And you think that you're confident that the naval drones that you've now agreed would patrol the Baltic will be enough to prevent this?
You can never prevent to be 100% sure, but you need to have some kind of a model. And our model is very clear. It was the private sector that told after an hour that the cable had been cut. Our authorities then identified one of 2 ships that it could have been. They went on top of the other one and moved it to our waters, and the rest followed. So, you can't prevent every case, but because we are now controlling the shadow fleet better, because we have better underwater infrastructure, because we can actually deal with different operations, I think we're much better at it.
How would you, if you do find evidence of sabotage, and you name the culprit, what would you expect to be the further ramifications of that? Do you consider it to be an aggressive act by another country?
No, actually for us it's then a deterrent that it wouldn't happen again, because it's not in the interest of anyone. You have to understand that the Baltic Sea is a small sea. It takes about 30 years for a drop of water to come in and out. That means that there are 2 issues there. One are the underwater cables and the critical infrastructure. The other one is an environmental catastrophe, and it's not in the interest of Russia or anyone else to have an environmental catastrophe. The big problem we have now is that they are basically transporting this sanctioned oil on ships that are not good. They're old, they're decrepit, and the rest of it. So this risks the environmental catastrophe more, so we have to deal with it.
Obviously, President Trump is now back in office, and in recent weeks he's made comments about not ruling out military action to take control of Greenland and other areas. What's your response to that?
Well, I think the response is that in foreign policy you have to deal with things case by case, right? So we all understand that Trump has changed American foreign policy, and it's more transactional. We deal with that. And of course, we look at it from 2 tracks. One track is our own, what is in Finland's interest. A country like Finland produces 60% of the world's icebreakers. The alliance needs 70 to 90 icebreakers. Is there a deal to be made there? Actually, it was Donald Trump's idea originally to do something on icebreakers. And the other track that we look at is, of course, our Nordic track and EU track and international law track. I come from a small country. For me, it's very important 3 principles are met. 1, independence of a nation state. 2, sovereignty of a nation state. And 3, territorial integrity of a nation state.
Well, those principles, do you think that Donald Trump is, given his past record, you say it's case by case, but looking at his past record, he's someone who in any number of realms has ignored very long-established norms. Do you expect him to respect those principles of the integrity of national borders and sovereignty?
Well, I hope it is in the interest and in the value base of the United States to do that. You have to remember that there are 2 things in my mind from a European security perspective that drives Donald Trump and his administration. One is peace. He wants to make peace. He did it in the Middle East. He wants to do it in Ukraine. And in order to do that, you need alliances. You need some kind of rules. And the other one is that the U.S. wants to retain its position as a superpower. If you want to be a superpower, you have to have allies. And the closest allies, about 25% of the world's countries, they come from Europe. And I'm sure that our transatlantic partnership will be strong even after these 4 years.
You have, in your previous career, you've thought very deeply about NATO, about European defence. I think many people would say that the first Trump administration actually had a constructive impact on NATO.
Very much so.
And I just wondered how you think, you know, how should NATO and European members of NATO respond and make the most out of this second Trump administration?
Yeah. Listen to what Trump has to say. He was right originally when he said that Europeans are not taking care of their defense enough. He was right in saying that we're not using enough for our defense expenditure. I'm not speaking for Finland because we're up at 2.4, 2.5%. We have one of the largest militaries in Europe, and we actually buy American military material.
You're not at 5%, though.
We're not at 5%. The United States is not at 5% either. So the fact that he's pushing us to do more on our own, I think, is a good thing. So what I want to say is that listen to what President Trump has to say and act accordingly. A country like Finland will certainly do that.
Do you think people talk about stretch targets? Do you think 5% is a useful stretch target? Is it even useful to talk about it?
Instead of looking at the percentages, look at what you have. So I think it's very important that you have a strong Air Force, you have a strong Navy, and you have strong land forces. And then you have the military capacity, air, land, and sea, long-range missiles, F-18s, F-35s, artillery, and the rest of it. So kind of you have to put your money where your mouth is, in a sense that it's not the percentage that counts, it's the stuff that you have. One example, the US has something like 30, 34 different military systems. Europe has over 170. There's a lot of rationing to be done there.
We're also coming up to 3 years on the war in Ukraine. How do you think it should end? What would you expect over the next few months?
Well, I think it obviously should end first in a ceasefire and then a peace agreement. And I think that peace agreement needs to respect at least three principles. One is the independence of Ukraine. Two is the sovereignty of Ukraine. In other words, its right to decide whether it wants to be in the EU and or NATO. And thirdly, it needs to respect the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And I think Trump has a huge role to play here. And in many ways, a Ukrainian victory is an American and a Trumpian victory.
You've talked about China actually potentially playing a key role in ending the dispute. Some people think that will be Trump's role, is to pick up the phone to President Xi. What role can China play?
There's an interesting connection here, and we already saw that. I think President Trump spoke with President Xi Jinping on Saturday, and I spent 3.5 hours with President Xi Jinping in October at a state visit. And my message is that China has influence on Russia. So if there's a connection between President Xi and President Trump on, yes, we need to muster a peace deal, I think it's pretty much the job of President Xi to convince Putin time to do a deal. And then it's the job of Donald Trump to find a deal which is fair, just, and where there's no peace without Ukraine or no peace without Europe.